Welcome to the Connecting Mind and Spirit podcast, a podcast devoted to helping you understand and apply the teachings of A Course in Miracles. I am your host, Fiona Williams, author of the newly released book, Awakening Your Right Mind, Healing from Fear and Following Spirit with A Course in Miracles. The benefits of A Course in Miracles are experienced through application of its right-minded principles. Throughout this podcast series, I will explain specific topics and teachings from A Course in Miracles and guide you through meditative exercises which will help you apply the teachings to your life. Thank you for being here, and let's get started. Hey, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I have the hot topic of anxiety, which I'll be addressing, and I'm going to be talking about how you can approach it with the help of A Course in Miracles. I'm also going to be sharing two other things, worldly things that you can use to help yourself that I have found highly effective. I'm going to be sharing a lot of information. You will be getting the replay so you can review it, but please don't be shy if you have a question or have something to say. Okay, so this is really relaxed and friendly, so we can get started. So as my subscribers, you may or may not know that I've recently recovered from PTSD. That involved a lot of hypervigilance, which also included a lot of panic. And then when I was younger, I had a lot of generalized anxiety. And I just happened to notice that the anxiety would fluctuate up and down depending on the circumstances of my life, whether stress. And if you can believe it, I also noticed that anxiety popped up one time when I actually just was really unstimulated and bored at a job. So where my mind was not being stimulated correctly, anxiety set in. So just kind of, that's my history of anxiety. I'm very grateful to say that I'm out of it completely. And of course, this is why I want to share this with everyone in an effort to be helpful. So there is hope. One of the first things that I would love to share with you is that anxiety and panic are both known as being highly treatable. So you're not stuck in these things. And so we just want to use A Course in Miracles to help us get out of it, because with A Course in Miracles, we're going to be really getting to the root of what's causing the anxiety, right? And we're using the help of the Holy Spirit, our higher self, to support us. Okay, so in A Course in Miracles, we're taught that anxiety is the product of an untrained mind. So we know that in this world, our minds are completely untrained. We have tangential thinking. We follow the ego down rabbit holes, all of that kind of stuff. But I also like to acknowledge that anxiety is actually more like a symptom. It's a symptom that there's something going on beneath the surface, right? So you can look at your own life. Has anxiety shown up when you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed, too much going on? Or sometimes anxiety can just be the result of an unresolved issue, perhaps from your childhood or your younger years. But either way, anxiety is presenting as a symptom that there's something beneath, ego content, that you need to correct and bring up for healing. So I just encourage you to kind of check in with yourself and go, why do I think anxiety is presenting? Is it an unresolved issue? Have I gone through a stressful time? Am I unstimulated? Things of that nature, because we want to bring a lot of self-awareness to why we may be experiencing anxiety. And I know it can be challenging to look at our fear thoughts, but what I always like to say is that if you're going to look at a fear thought, which we have to eventually, is that we can do that with the Holy Spirit. So, when I went through PTSD and facing a lot of anger, some anxiety, panic, whatever it was I was experiencing, I always just invited the Holy Spirit in. And I wasn't shy to be vocal about it. It was just me alone in a room. And I would just say, Holy Spirit, I know you're with me. This is my thoughts about what I have to say about the anger I'm experiencing. Or here's the panic. Will you be with me? And I essentially just put the Holy Spirit in charge to be with me as I went through these things. And the important thing with that is, so as we're taught in A Course in Miracles, we have the wrong mind of the ego, but we have the right mind of the Holy Spirit. So we want to start to use the right mind of the Holy Spirit, because that's how we start to work our way up to the realization that we're one in God. If we continue to do things alone with the ego mind, the ego is just going to keep us stuck. So if you find yourself going through something, a heightened response, be sure to invite the Holy Spirit in, because you can at least get right-minded about it. You don't have to go through it alone. Okay, so that was particularly helpful for me. Okay, so one thing that I would also like to say about anxiety is that it's a red flag. It's a red flag that you yourself are a call for love, right? Because in A Course in Miracles, we're taught that there's actually no fear, but there's a call for love. So you yourself, if you're anxious, are a call for love. So answer the call for love with love. Pay attention to yourself and start to put the spotlight on you and your healing. Okay? All right. So the first thing to note about anxiety is that it's a habit. We are currently dealing with the habit of thinking with the ego. Okay. And now we're essentially, through our work with A Course in Miracles, we're creating a right-minded habit where I am now turning away from the ego gently in a way that feels good for me, but I'm turning towards my higher self. Okay. We're taught that the Holy Spirit, we can think of it as our higher self. So now I'm turning to the Holy Spirit to support me in breaking the habit of turning to the ego. So now I'm changing things. Okay. But when we think of anxiety as a habit, I like to say, when you ever like hear the first few notes of a song and you're like, I know this song. You can go ahead with the verse, everything, the melody. So when you have an anxious thought, the start of an anxious thought, if you've been responding to that thought before with fear, it's very easy for you to go down that rabbit hole again, right? Because you know what that thought is like. You know the fear that it produces. So it's no different than hearing a familiar song. There's that familiar thought and there's the fear pattern that I go into. So I always find that that's kind of helpful. It kind of takes you out of the tornado of fear and kind of just helps you recognize what is actually happening. I'm used to this thought or a thought like it, and here's that fear pattern that I go into. Another thing to note is that fear is also a perception. If I asked you to look around you and just point out all the things that you see are red, you would be able to do that. But when we're going about our daily life, if you have fear as a perception, you are going to look around at your surroundings and even your own thoughts, and you're going to look through the lens of fear. So fear is a habit, fear is a perception. And these are the two things that we're taught in A Course in Miracles that we need help with. Okay, in chapter 2 of the Course, Jesus says, you've probably heard me say it before, but Jesus says, don't ask me to save you from fear. I can't do that. If you've taken a fear thought seriously, you're going to feel those effects. That's cause and effect. He's like, but what I can do for you is I can highlight for you the power of your mind, how you are using your mind incorrectly and against yourself, and how you can start to turn to your higher self for help, become right-minded, and eventually return home to the full awareness of your source. Right? So Jesus is very clear, and I highly recommend reading chapter 2 of the Course if you're dealing with anxiety, because it really highlights the source of fear. Okay? And how we're really doing this to ourselves. Okay? So it's very, very helpful. So I kind of like that Jesus is empowering us. He says, you're doing this unto yourself. I know it. He's like, he's not shy to say in the Course, he's like, I've been there. I've been a man. I went through this. He's like, I'm going to help you out by enlightening you to the power of your mind and how you're choosing incorrectly. Okay. So he's empowering us, which I think is actually really, really helpful. Okay. So now I want to look at the ego's use of anxiety. The ego has an intention, and that intention is always separation. Okay, so essentially, ego is another term for separation, where I think I separated from my source. That belief that I separated from God produced an enormous amount of guilt and fear in the mind, and anxiety is essentially an expression of that. Okay, so we want to recognize that the ego's use of anxiety is going to be to keep us separate from others and separate from the truth that we're one in our source. That's its goal. That's always its goal. Okay. So when we look at the ego, it's surviving through our belief in it. That's what we're taught in the course. Simply put in the course, if you didn't believe in the ego, it would simply cease to be. It sounds simplistic, but the fact of the matter is we need to look at all the ways that we're believing in the ego, right? So we can stop doing so and start to turn to our higher self. So what does anxiety do? Well, it keeps me hyper focused on this world, keeps me hyper focused on the body, and me thinking that I'm just this vulnerable, fearful, guilty thing. It also has me thinking that other people are fearful. So there's that separation at work, that agenda. So all of this is keeping my belief fixated on the ego, and the ego gets to survive that much longer in my mind. So when you just take a step back and look at the agenda behind anxiety, that's what's really going on. Okay. And personally, I find that to be very helpful because when I recognize that, anxiety starts to feel less fearful because I understand that there's something going on behind it where the ego is simply just trying to survive. So I don't know about you, but it kind of takes the heat out of anxiety to go, here's the ego just trying to survive again through my belief. Here it is. Okay. So I want to share with you just a few symptoms of ego thinking, just a few of them. So when you find yourself overanalyzing, obsessive, repetitive, tangential, and aimless thinking, having songs or words stuck in your head, if you're holding a grudge, if your mind's just super chatty, or you're rehashing old conversations or situations, or if you find yourself in a state of resistance or non-acceptance. Those are symptoms of ego thinking. And anxiety is also a symptom of ego thinking. It's no different than those other ways of thinking where tangential, or my mind's just super chatty today, or there's that old conversation. But the difference is, I believe, is that anxiety produces such uncomfortable effects that where those other ego symptoms maybe don't produce as undesirable effects compared to anxiety, because anxiety has a lot of fear and it is a very kind of physical expression of fear. And I feel that's why people really, really struggle with it. You know, would it be fair to say that you're actually afraid of feeling fear? Fear of fear. You know, and that's something that I highly recognized when I went through PTSD is I had a fear of feeling fear. I had a fear of getting startled. I had a fear of getting panicky. I had a fear of so many things, but it was really just fear of fear. So we kind of just want to start to notice that anxiety is a symptom of ego thinking. All right. And I also want to highlight that with anxiety, it can lead to OCD in the sense that you are trying to control your environment. If you find yourself having had some OCD, obsessive compulsive kind of symptoms, I had that when I was younger, where I really tried to control my environment. It was really to just try and keep anxiety at bay. So they can kind of go hand in hand. So if you do find yourself dealing with some OCD symptoms, that really is just you trying to control your environment. So again, you don't feel such a heightened state of fear. Okay, how is this all sounding? Is this relevant, resonating? Okay, good, good. Okay, don't be shy to shout out if you have a question or anything to share. All right. Now, I would like to share with you how you may be unintentionally reinforcing these fearful thought patterns and anxiety in your mind. So it's important to recognize that all of these ways that you're reinforcing anxiety in your mind are really actually forms of repetition. We are taught in the course about the harm of repetition. So there can be harmful repetition where I'm just spiraling in the ego, or there can be helpful repetition where, let's say, I'm doing a course lesson and a few times throughout the day, I'm turning to my right mind and I'm applying this course lesson. So you want to recognize what you're repeating and how you're using repetition either against yourself or for yourself. Okay, remember this is all about habits. Okay, so some of the ways that we repeat fear thoughts, one of them with anxiety would be analysis. Okay, where we can really, go down the rabbit hole of, looking at symptoms, things like that. But analyzing what you're anxious about is really not helpful. One important thing to recognize is that if you're in a fearful ego-based state of mind, anything you continue to do in the wrong mind is just going to produce more fear. So if you're feeling anxious and you start to analyze, you have not stepped out of the ego, the wrong mind of the ego, you're still in it. So you probably won't find anything particularly helpful. It's just going to reinforce the fear that you are unsafe and feeling threatened in some way. So analysis. Also, we're taught in the course that to analyze the error in your mind does not bring correction. So you're really just reinforcing the error by analyzing the error in your mind. Okay? Defending yourself, the harm of your defending yourself. So if you have a habit of, there's nothing wrong with locking your door or getting car insurance or any of those things. You want to be normal, right? But if you're overly defending yourself about what you're anxious about, that can be really, really detrimental, okay, to your own psyche. And it's just really holding on to the fear instead of correcting it. Okay, and I'm going to be talking about how you can kind of find a balance in feeling safe while you turn to the Holy Spirit. So don't worry, I'll get into the good stuff. Another way that you may be repeating anxiety and fear thoughts is by sharing your story. Okay, if you go to a lot of people and you just have this story, here's my story, here's my pain. There's something to be said about having one or two people that you trust. Of course, you want that connection. But if you're oversharing, right, you're just repeating the fear. And then following that would be reassurance seeking. Okay, a lot of anxious people seek reassurance through others. Like, this is what I'm afraid of. What do you have to say? And that might help for a few minutes, but then they go to the next person. And so a lot of reassurance seeking is, again, you're not correcting the fear thought, you're staying in it. And you're just asking a bunch of people about it, and it's reinforcing it. And another way that you could be repeating fear thoughts is essentially just through self-sabotaging language. Are you saying that I'm stuck in this? But just pay attention to yourself. What kind of language are you using around the anxiety, right? What are you saying to yourself? But another way that we uphold anxiety is by using attack thoughts, okay? Where we maybe attack other people in our minds, even attack ourselves. All of that just continues to produce fear in the mind, right? So the old adage, right? Hurt people hurt. So if you find yourself really fearful of others, distrustful of others, that's continuing to make you feel unsafe and anxious. So we want to pay attention to the kinds of thoughts that we're harboring, because this is the fact. A Course in Miracles, through our forgiveness work and using the Course lessons, we're aiming to make our minds benign. But right now, with the attack thoughts that we harbor and have and take seriously and perpetuate, we are literally attacking ourselves. So the reason you do not feel safe is because of the attack thoughts that you're holding on to. Okay, so one thing that I would like to share with you guys is the cycle of fear. But essentially what we're doing is we have the initial ego fear thought. Okay, we're allowed to have that initial ego fear thought, right? But the next step happens almost instantaneously, is where we take that ego thought seriously. Okay, so now I've moved into taking that ego thought seriously. And then what happens is I have an emotional or physical reaction. Okay, now this happened to me last night. I was actually just listening to a really powerful song, and I actually had like a fear response to one of the lyrics. And I felt it just instantly, just a little bit of fear run through my arm. It was very interesting. And I was like, oh, that produced a bit of fear. I took some time to forgive it and I moved on. But either way, I had an immediate response. It was very interesting. Now, what happens through the ego's eyes is that, so here's my ego thought. I take it seriously. And then I'm having the reaction. But what the ego does is it uses that reaction as evidence that what you're fearful of is real, that you're unsafe and feeling threatened. So what's that? That's another ego thought. And it goes on and on and on and on. And you stay in this cycle of fear where I took it seriously. Now I'm feeling the reaction, the discomfort, and I'm continuing on. Okay. So we really want to pay attention to how the ego uses our physical reactions and even, emotional reactions as evidence that its thought system is real. that the fear is real. Whereas the Holy Spirit's over here saying, hey, hey, I've got a better way. Okay. So we just really want to recognize that that's the cycle of fear. And what you can do, though, and then what I share beneath it, is that you're able to stop the cycle of fear when you get to the point of when you feel the emotional and physical reaction. Instead of going into another ego thought, you can start to correct that ego thought. Okay. So you want to start, and I'll be going through this when we go through the true forgiveness process. But what you want to start to do is go, oh, there's that ego thought. I'm feeling myself react. That's my cue. That's my cue for correction. And through correction, you hop off the cycle of fear and it stops. Now, that will take practice. It is a habit that you're creating. But it's really like even Gary Renard, author of Disappearance of the Universe, he said that you are more likely to notice how you feel. That is going to be your cue to correct your fear thoughts. Okay, so you want to pay attention to yourself. Okay, and so I'm going to be getting into how you can kind of reframe those physical and emotional reactions, but that's your cue. Yeah, so, it's really, yeah, the ego's like, this whole world, right? Our relationships, the challenges, all of those things, all of that through the ego's eyes. The ego's like, see, I told you I was right. That's what it's doing. And so in A Course in Miracles, we're taught that only our perception can be sick. And when we're seeing everything as evidence the ego is real, that everything is evidence of fear, our perception is sick, and it's called misperception. And so we're taught, and this is an excellent part of the course that you can also read the preface. The preface to the course talks a lot about this. But what we have to do is we have to change our perception from misperception to the true perception of the Holy Spirit, our higher self. And it says in the preface of the course that you can't do this alone. You need help, which is great because as course students, we're like, we know we got help. Okay, so there's hope. But that's exactly what we're doing. Remember, fear is a perception, and I'm aiming to change that perception with the help of my higher self. Okay, all right. So now, so I'm going to end this session when we get to the end. I'm going to end on the true forgiveness portion. So I'll get into all of that. So you have a good understanding of it. But just before I do, I want to just go through some things about what you can do also to support yourself. Just with anxious and panic symptoms. So one of the first things that I would highlight is the need for acceptance. If you're so when I was having a panic attack, I found myself after having so many that I actually just got to a level of acceptance. The same also went for when I was going through vertigo because of Meniere's disease. When I was in the vertigo, I actually had gone through it so much, I just got to a level of acceptance and just going, okay, I know this. I'm familiar with it. Holy Spirit, come on in and be with me. Okay, so acceptance is a beautiful thing. But what I want to highlight is that the opposite of acceptance is resistance. What are you doing when you resist? You're actually feeding into the fear. So I think it's really, really helpful from a practical point of view to recognize that if you're having some anxiety symptoms or panic symptoms, you're actually having an adrenaline response. That would explain the discomfort of those physical symptoms. I don't want to go too heavy on those because I want everyone to stay kind of calm and relaxed, but you're familiar with the symptoms of anxiety and panic. Those are adrenaline responses. So instead of judging that response, if you can start to accept, okay, here it is. Here are these symptoms. And what would be the kindest thing I feel for you to do is to let that adrenaline response pass. That would probably be the most helpful thing. Now, one of the ways you can move through the adrenaline response, these are just examples from my own life. It's important that you do things that are good for you, but to help the adrenaline to pass. So I would go play badminton. I would go walk my dogs. I would do gentle movement, but I'm helping the adrenaline to get out of my system in a safe way, as opposed to resisting the experience. I just used it differently. And admittedly, when I was going through some serious anger during the PTSD, I was not ashamed to throw ice cubes in the shower. That's an excellent thing you can do to help release that adrenaline from that rage in a healthy way. But either way, you're just doing healthy, no shame, have no shame. This is the experience, right? But essentially you want to be healthy about how you're releasing that adrenaline. So what works for you, right? For me, badminton, walking my dogs, things like that, just getting the body moving in a healthy and safe way. But the key is that you are comfortable and you're gentle. As you do that, if this is something you choose to do, what I would recommend is just essentially just try and stay as present as you can. If the fear thoughts, the anger thoughts come up, okay, Holy Spirit, there it is. I'm not resisting it. There's that thought. Yeah, I'm angry about it. And you just talk it out, but you talk it out with the Holy Spirit with you, to the Holy Spirit. Think of the Holy Spirit as your friend. There you are. Let's talk this out, right? But you're letting it out. You're not resisting. And you're moving and you're being really gentle with yourself. Okay, so that was super helpful for me. There was a park near my old house when I was going through the worst of the PTSD. I was there like twice a day. But it was super helpful to be in nature and just to get moving. Okay. One thing that I would also say is absolutely essential is that you calm down completely. Don't try not to stay in a slightly agitated state. See if you can completely calm down. Because what's important is that as anxiety is a habit, so is feeling the effects of anxiety. So you might go, oh, well, I just kind of feel a bit agitated or irritable, la, la, la. Not, so it's important that you want to kind of start to train yourself that it's okay to feel calm. Your nervous system got worked up and you need a bit of support to fully calm down. So just see if you can start to do that and go, I'm not going to stop until I feel completely calm. Just see if you can start to build that, right? Because it's kind of like a muscle. But I think it's very, very important for you to teach your nervous system that you can calm down completely and you are starting to recognize what it feels like to feel safe. Okay. All right. Aside from calming the adrenaline response, if you really want to move the needle, I really suggest that you take advantage of those calmer moments in your life. When you're calm, when you're relaxed, is there a course lesson that you can do? Is there a meditation you like that you can do? I would also recommend the art of deep breathing. If you could do some deep breathing for 2 minutes and then see if you can extend it to 10 minutes and on and on. But essentially what you're doing with deep breathing is, again, you're helping yourself get used to being in a relaxed state, right? These are something that we have to start to build, but take advantage of those calmer, quieter moments. I would also suggest humor. Watch some comedies, okay? The problem is that we took the ego seriously. Humor helps us cut through the seriousness of the ego. Okay, so I am completely unashamed about watching comedy quite often and just silly things that I find humorous. You're not laughing at people, it's not that kind of laughter, but it just helps you to release the tension and the seriousness that you have been placing on the world. So you want to take advantage of those quieter moments and support yourself and essentially just creating a new way of being, more relaxed, more loving. All right. So I also want to point out that as your nervous system starts to calm down, you're going to find yourself less reactive to fear thoughts. So I don't know, what people are going through or what people who will be listening to are going through. When I was going through PTSD, it actually took a change of location for me to calm down completely. I had to leave. But I gave it a good go. I was there a little longer than I planned to be, but the situation in my life changed and my husband was able to take a job in a different province and I was able to move. That really supported me in feeling calmer. I got out of a pretty toxic situation, family situation. So that supported me. Everyone is different. I still saw it through the Holy Spirit's eyes when I was still in that environment. So it's still an opportunity for forgiveness and healing. But you have to pay attention to what's helpful for you. So do pay attention that if your nervous system needs to calm down, what are the things you need to do to support yourself in doing that? Okay. And you can turn to the Holy Spirit for that guidance. Absolutely. Right. You're not alone in this. We want to essentially open up and be in kind of what I call receiver mode. Holy Spirit, I let your inspiration flow through. What would be best to help me through this situation? I'm open to your guidance, knowing that forgiveness is always what I need to do, but I can open to your guidance. And that's very helpful. Okay. So before I get into the true forgiveness practice and explaining it, here are just a few things that I want to share about coming out of anxiety. A beautiful thing Gary Renard said in one of his online classes last year is he said, you know, you can be pretty insistent when it comes to things. The ego, it's being done by you. It's not being done to you. This is you doing this to yourself, which is powerful in its own way. But essentially, you want to put yourself at the level of cause. If I'm in charge of my mind, and one of the course lessons is I rule my mind, which I alone must rule, right? So, and in saying that, then I turn to my higher self. I have that choice, right? But I'm in charge. So you can be insistent. And one of the things that really helps with anxiety is to put your foot down. Put your foot down and know that you can use this as an opportunity for healing. Okay. Because it really does come to a point where you just go, enough's enough, right? I don't know if anyone else feels that way, but I've definitely felt that way a few times. So one of the things, other than being insistent, is reframe this. Reframe anxiety as not something that you're stuck in, not something that's being done to you. Use it as what it really is, which is an opportunity to heal. If you're experiencing anxiety, you can use this as an opportunity to heal. It's no different than your other challenges. Okay, it is ego expressing itself and you're taking it seriously, and that's what needs to change. Okay, so when you put your foot down and you take control and go, no, I'm in charge. And being in charge, I choose the Holy Spirit. I'm framing this as an opportunity to heal. And every single time I feel anxious or panicky, there's another opportunity to heal. Okay, because what is also highlighted for us in Gary Renard's work is that beneath every fear-based reaction, every lesson is unconscious guilt that needs to be healed. And layer by layer, we bring that up to forgiveness. And sometimes it looks the same. Like, you know, there's one thing that I'm still forgiving from the PTSD experience, you know, and I'm like, oh, there it is again. But the more I forgive it, it's just another layer of unconscious guilt that's just wearing the same mask, right? But I know what to do with it. And oddly enough, my reaction to this particular thing is getting less and less. It's getting less intense, and I'm becoming more calm about it. And I'm really just going, there you are again. Up you go for correction. So always pay attention that every time you feel anxious or whatever it might be, there's a layer of unconscious guilt beneath it that you need to bring up for correction so it can heal. So this is your opportunity. I'm just going through my notes. Oh yeah, another thing that I would like to share with you is that remember that this is just a moment in time. It's a phase of your life. It's not your entire life. Okay, it doesn't need to take hold of you forever. Okay, so I think that's just really helpful to remember that this is just a phase of time. And if I start to treat this, and if I start to commit and move the needle forward, then this really is just a phase of time. Because honestly, using the true forgiveness process, using the healing meditation from Gary Renard's book, Love Has Forgotten No One, page 79, highly recommend it. Using those two things in particular, healing has happened very, very quickly. And I think quicker than if I was to try and do it any other way, because I'm treating the root cause of the fear, which is in the mind. And that's the beauty of true forgiveness. We're taught in A Course in Miracles that this is the fastest way. It's not the only way, but it is the fastest. So be open-minded. Let yourself be surprised. You never know if you commit to these techniques, how quickly things could kind of move along, right? Most importantly, at the heart of it is you are remembering your source. There is great love on the other side of this. This is essentially what this is bringing us to, is the literal peace of God, that you are the love of God. Not only are you worthy of it, you are it. So there's something so beautiful behind it, right? So when that helps me go, here's my opportunity to forgive. Good. It's a stepping stone home. This is going to help me remember, right? So when you tune into why this is important for you, that can be a really good motivator. Okay, so now we're going to get into the true forgiveness process. If you have your copy of the course with you, if you don't, that's okay. I'm going to be reading it out, but it's on page 90, the very end of chapter 5. It is the true forgiveness process is in italics. I'm just going to kind of walk you through Gary's 3-step process, and then I'm going to guide you through this. So Gary Renard has kind of chopped it down to 3 steps. The first step would be, okay, I'm recognizing I'm in fear. There's that fear response. Okay, so it's that awareness. In that first step, you are acknowledging that nothing is being done to you, but this is being done by you. You essentially claim responsibility for your reaction, which puts you at the level of cause, not effect, cause. You're in charge. So this is being done by me. And from this beautiful place of recognizing that I'm the one doing this, I'm the one who took the ego seriously, that I can now make a better choice. So the first step is I recognize that I'm upset in some way, feeling anger, feeling a reaction, physical, whatever it is. But this is being done by me. I'm at the level of cause. The second step is known as the holy instant, where I turn from the wrong mind of the ego to the right mind of the Holy Spirit. This is the holy instant. So, Holy Spirit, please take this from me, interpret it for me. Will you please judge this for me? I don't know how to do it. You please take this from me and judge this for me. That's the second step. Okay. The third step highlights our spiritual sight, which is done at the level of the mind. Spiritual sight, accepting the atonement, that I never left my source. Remember that our original problem is thinking that we left our source, but taking that idea seriously. So with the third step, I'm accepting the atonement that I never left my source. We're taught in the course that this one idea, it's very, very powerful. Okay, so one thing that I would highlight is that the ego itself is an idea of separation. The atonement is a true idea, reminding you that you never left God. Okay, so it's exceptionally powerful. There's a lesson in the course that says the truth will correct all errors in my mind. And personally, when I read that lesson, like I just get goosebumps. It just lights me up. It reminds me that the truth that I never left my beloved source can heal all things, right? Essentially, it's healing my mind, right? It's healing my perception. Okay, so it's very, very powerful. When it comes to anxiety and panic, I've already, shared that there's ego content beneath it that needs to be corrected and healed. As you address that ego content beneath your anxious panic symptoms, you will start to feel relief. One thing I would share that if you start to have nightmares or things showing up in your sleeping dreams, that those are just as worthy of your forgiveness as anything else is. Okay, because in the course we're taught that right now we're having the waking dream, but when we're asleep it's the sleeping dream, but there's still a dream. And sometimes we're shown what we need to heal in our sleeping dreams because it's safer for us to experience it that way. So just want to point out that if you're having nightmares or night terrors or anything like that, please be sure to forgive that content. It's just as worthy of your forgiveness. Okay. So I am going to read the first paragraph before the true forgiveness process. And then I'm going to kind of explain the true forgiveness process, just correlating it with Gary's. And then we're going to do the true forgiveness practice. Okay. So on page 90, paragraph 6, just before the practice itself, is so powerful. If you listened to my podcast before on forgiveness, you know I like to highlight this. So here it is again. Decision cannot be difficult. This is obvious if you realize that you must already have decided not to be wholly joyous if that is how you feel. So essentially what Jesus is highlighting for us is like, if you recognize you're upset, clearly you don't want to feel that way. Therefore, the first step in the undoing is to recognize that you actively decided wrongly, but can as actively decide otherwise. Be very firm with yourself in this and keep yourself fully aware that the undoing process, which does not come from you, it doesn't come from ego Fiona or any of our egos, is nevertheless within you because God placed it there. It's in my right mind where the Holy Spirit is. That's my answer. It's there. Your part is merely to return your thinking to the point at which the error was made in my mind and give it over to the atonement in peace. Say this to yourself as sincerely as you can, remembering that the Holy Spirit will respond fully to your slightest invitation. I must have decided wrongly because I am not at peace. I made the decision myself, but I can also decide otherwise. That is step one, right? As shared through Gary's. I'm recognizing that I'm upset. I'm the one who made that decision. I want to decide otherwise because I want to be at peace. I do not feel guilty because the Holy Spirit will undo all the consequences of my wrong decision if I will let him. Okay, there's step two. I'm turning to the Holy Spirit. I choose to let him by allowing him to decide for God, for me, the atonement. I never left my source. That's the process. It's very, very powerful. So as a quick example, if I had a panic attack during the PTSD, I would practice my acceptance. I'd invite the Holy Spirit to be with me. I'd move through it. I'd let the adrenaline response subside. And then I would apply this process. So I kind of look at it as like a two-pronged effect. I'm addressing the physical response in a loving and kind way, right? I'm putting the Holy Spirit in charge, which is perfect, but I'm also addressing, because we're working at the level of our belief. At some level, we still believe we are these bodies. When we feel fear, it feels real, right? So we're being kind to ourselves and addressing that. You're not asked to grit your teeth through this. In fact, don't grit your teeth through true forgiveness. Because remember what it says. Say this to yourself as sincerely as you can. That's the key ingredient. Sincerity. So once that adrenaline response has passed, at least this is what worked for me, then yeah, I don't want to feel that again. Whoa, like that was a fear response. I got to do this differently. So there's my sincerity, is that's got to go, that unconscious guilt. So there's my turn. And there's that sincerity, and I go through it. And the confidence that you start to develop as you use the true forgiveness process with that sincerity is you will simply start to feel better. You will start to feel less reactive, and you will start to recognize within yourself that this is what feels good, that this is what's working for you. It's very personal. Remember that the Holy Spirit knows how to speak to you personally. It knows what works for you. It knows the words that work for you, the symbols that work for you. The Holy Spirit is in your mind to support you. So open up. But essentially, this is going to start to feel right. And it is true that when you start to use true forgiveness and it becomes a habit, you start to miss it if you don't do it. So you start to feel icky, like you kind of need a shower if you don't do it. Okay, so it can become part of you. And then it becomes your right-minded habit where I'm turning to the Holy Spirit. I'm turning to my higher self. And bit by bit, beneath that anxiety, beneath the panic, you are opening that door for correction. It's also helpful, let the Holy Spirit right on in. This is something I like to do before I go to sleep, is I envision like I open a door in my mind and I just go, Holy Spirit, come on in. I just light up my mind, all the dark corners, all the thoughts I might not know about, the thoughts I do know about, the shameful ones, all of that stuff. Here it is. I let you in. I keep nothing from you. Because it is when things stay hidden, that's when you start to get physical symptoms and fear-based symptoms and ego symptoms. So you don't want to keep anything hidden from the Holy Spirit. You want to start to invite it in. Okay? All right. So if you're ready, I am going to guide you through the true forgiveness process. If you don't have something specific, you just speak to the Holy Spirit in your mind and just go, you know what I've been experiencing. I would like to apply true forgiveness to this. Okay? So you can be very, very honest with the Holy Spirit. Okay, so if you're ready, you can close your eyes and just listen to my voice. I must have decided wrongly because I am not at peace. I made the decision myself, but I can also decide otherwise. I want to decide otherwise because I want to be at peace. I do not feel guilty because the Holy Spirit will undo all the consequences of my wrong decision if I will let Him. I choose to let Him by allowing Him to decide for God, for me. And if you want to take a moment and maybe feel the warmth of God's love, perhaps a white light filling your mind, follow your heart. And when you are ready, you can open your eyes. The important thing to acknowledge is the power of your innocence. The reason you are experiencing all of this is because on some level you think you're guilty. There's extreme power in acknowledging your innocence and tuning into it. I'm awakening in God. The Holy Spirit knows who I really am. The ego can seem very, very complex, but like what I like to say is that the simplicity of spirit overtakes the complexity of the ego. The only reason the ego seems complex is because it needs you to get caught up in its cobwebs, because it needs your belief. It needs the power of your mind to survive. So we think that things should be really hard when that's the opposite is true. The simplicity of spirit. I am innocent. Nothing has happened. I'm awakening in God. Okay, so I also encourage you maybe throughout your day in those quieter moments where I encourage you to build that muscle of being right-minded. Bring in your innocence. Tune into it. There really is a better way. The Course isn't lying when it says there is a better way, and there is. And this works. It does work. And it's your commitment and your consistency that is going to move this forward for you. Most importantly, I think what's always stood out for me on this path is that we are taught in the Course there is a choice. So I don't owe the ego anything but my correction, right? It's nothing. It's nothing. I just believe it's something. So there's a comfort in knowing that there's the Holy Spirit right there for me, right there for us all. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. I love you. I'm so grateful for each of you.